وأشهد أن محمدا عبد الله ورسوله وصفيه من خلقه وخليله أدى الأمانة ونصح للأمة وكشف الله به الغمة وتركها على المحجة البيضاء ليلها كنهارها لا يزيغ عنها إلا هالك فاجزه اللهم عنا خير الجزاء وعن آله وصحبه الأبرار ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. All praise is due to Allah. We praise Him and we thank Him and we seek His forgiveness. And we seek refuge in Him from the evil within our souls. Whomsoever Allah guides cannot be misguided, and whomsoever Allah chooses to misguide cannot be brought back to guidance. I bear witness and I testify that there is no deity worthy of worship except Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, the Almighty, the All-Powerful. And I bear witness and I testify that Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is His final messenger and prophet, sent to all of humanity as a guidance and as a mercy. My dear brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us on numerous occasions in the Quran to be conscious of Him and to have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون. O you who believe, be conscious of Allah, a true consciousness, and die not except in a state of submission, in a state of Islam. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله ولتنظر نفس ما قدمت لغد واتقوا الله إن الله خبير بما تعملون. O you who believe, be conscious of Allah and look to what you have done for your tomorrow, and be conscious of Allah, for He knows all that you do. My dear brothers and sisters, we often make judgments in our societies, within our cultures, within our bigger society, within our religion, within our different ethnic groups. We often make judgments about specific moral and ethical issues that surround us, that pertain to us as individuals and as a collective. And so on a societal level, sometimes we ask questions such as, is this dress code ethical? Is the length of this dress code ethical? Is it okay, is it ethical to lie to my employer and tell him I'm sick today when I'm not really sick? Is it ethical to skip a class and go with a friend or for a coffee? Is it ethical to walk by a colleague without saying hi, whether it's you or vice versa? Somebody walks by you and you feel that it is unethical that this person walked without greeting you. So we often ask such questions. And the list is endless. On a societal level and then on a more constrained level, on a religious level. We often ask questions, and this oftentimes pertains to sisters, unfortunately. Is this dress code ethical? Is this hijab ethical? Is this the way you dress ethical? Is listening to music ethical? Is going to the bar and not drinking, but because my lab or my employer is going there and I have to be there, is that ethical? And again, the list is endless in terms of ethics. And I'm not here to address any of these questions on any particular level or to give fatwas on any of these. But what I'm here to ask and to remind myself and all of us is, does Islam provide us with an ethical framework for dealing with these questions? Does Islam provide us with an ethical way of looking at life? And if we do, then do we use Islam to justify our ethics? Do we use Islam to say, I'm honest because I'm Muslim, or I'm trustworthy because I'm Muslim, or I don't steal because I'm Muslim? Do we use religion as a justification for our ethical adherence? And that's what I wanted to, inshallah, reflect upon in the next 20 minutes or so. And it's important to realize that ethics and morals existed before Islam. And so even in atheist societies, in secular societies, in idol worshipping societies, there was a system of ethics that used to be in place. And we can all resort to the example of the Prophet ﷺ pre-Islamic Arabia, where he was confronted with a confederation of the tribes where they gathered to support the weak. And so they established a confederation the Prophet ﷺ signed and witnessed, which he in prophethood said that I would join it even if I was Muslim, or even if I was given prophecy at the time. And that is a confederation of Hilf al-Fudul. And so Islamic, not Islamic, but rather ethics in general and morals had existed in early societies. And Hilf al-Fudul is one of those examples where the Prophet ﷺ alludes to an ethical standard that he would have accepted even if it is with non-Muslims. And so the Quran, my dear brothers and sisters, comes to us with a continuation and to build on an ethical system that somehow already exists. The Quran comes to us to continue an ethical trend that was already in society and to build on it and to nurture it. One of the French philosophers by the name of Henry Bergson in 1920, who won the Nobel Prize actually in 1927 for his theories on manners and morals and ethics, he theorized that people adhere to morals and ethics for one of two reasons. That people will adhere to morals and ethics because of societal pressure. And so there's a certain societal norm with ethics and standards, and so you open the door for your person behind you, you have to say hi to your friend, and that will vary from culture to culture. And this philosopher theorized that this is one of the things that allows people to adhere to ethics. And you can see how this example actually fails us sometimes. And if you look at the corrupted political regimes, if you look at even yesterday, there was the arrest of 37 political politicians. One of them was being the mayor of Laval. And so due to societal pressure, these people adhere to certain ethics that they agree upon. And sometimes they justify certain unethical standards. The other way of adhering to ethics that this philosopher theorizes is divine instruction. And so people are somehow divinely instructed to adhere to certain codes of ethics and standards, and that can vary whether Christian, Buddhist, Muslim, Jewish, and so on. And a lot of us Muslims may view ourselves in that situation, in the latter situation, that we as Muslims are divinely instructed to have a good ethical standard. And although that may be partially right, it's not entirely right. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of the day gave us a mind. And there's an expectation. So when this philosopher comes up with these two suggestions, another one, prominent scholar by the name of Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah Draz, early last century, criticizes this philosopher for not having stated the third category, which is the mind. That the mind that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bestowed upon us would allow us to reach conclusions on what is right and what is wrong and what is ethical and what is not, regardless of faith. And so the very premise, this Muslim scholar says, that of ethics being imposed by society or even by a divine instruction is actually unethical. The fact that you have to force somebody to comply to a certain norm of ethics is in itself unethical, and that we have to rationalize this with our minds. And even Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala confirms this statement through two verses that essentially criticize this philosopher's theory. One verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا الْهَوَىٰ أَن تَعْدِلُوا. And do not follow the ego. Do not follow your ego. Do not follow what people are doing because your ego says to do it. Because people are adhering to a certain ethical standard, you want to adhere to that because of your ego, to fulfill your ego. And that is one thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us from. فَلَا تَتَّبِعُوا الْهَوَىٰ أَن تَعْدِلُوا. The other thing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, ironically, to some of us, warns us of is to follow religion blindly. And on numerous occasions where the prophets have came to different tribes, and all prophets came to perfect manners, whether it be Lut or Hud who were prejudiced and takabbaru fil ard, or Lut who deviated from the fitrah, and so on. All prophets came to deliver on the issue of manners and ethics. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us some of these people respond by saying the following: Inna wajadna aba'ana ala umma wa inna ala atharihim muhtadun. We found our people, we found our fathers, we found our forefathers on a religion, and we followed them. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala warns us of this character, where you follow religion blindly, regardless of what religion that may be. And so then, this takes us to the notion that each of us has an ethical component that's ingrained in our minds, that each of us has an ethical system that is entrenched within us. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala confirms this after He makes 8 oaths. One of the most significant surahs in the Quran, in Surah Al-Shams, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes 8 oaths. He swears by 8 of His creation and concludes with the following. And so let me just go through the 8 of them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears by the sun and its dawn, and He swears by the moon as it follows, and He swears by the night as it breaks in, and he swears by the nighttime as it covers the daylight. And He swears by the heavens that He raised, and He swears by the earth that He put. And then finally He swears by the nafs that He has created, us. And He tells us, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala instilled in this nafs the ability to distinguish corruption from wrong, from right. The ability to distinguish wrongdoing from correct. And this was created within us since the early beginning of our creation. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَنَفْسٍ وَمَا سَوَّاهَا. As soon as He created this nafs, alhamaha, instilled within us the capability to distinguish right from wrong. And not only did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create this eternal structure within us, but He also gave it a sensory system, if you will, a sensing system that allows it to detect when wrongdoing occurs or when something is being done correctly. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بَلِ الْإِنسَانُ عَلَى نَفْسِهِ بَصِيرًا وَلَوْ أَلْقَى مَعَاذِيرًا. And so man overlooks his actions, is conscious of his doing, even if he throws excuses. And so even if he calls his employer and throws out an excuse that is unethical or unjustifiable, then that man was conscious that what he was done was wrong. And that is a sensory system within us. Take another sensory system, for example. Take the issue of regret. Regret is a consequence of an ethical wrongdoing. And I'm sure many of these politicians that were arrested yesterday are falling in a deep regretful scenario where they regretted every action that they've done wrongly, ethically speaking. And so take the example of regret, which is an ethical consequence of a wrongdoing. And it's something that is degrading to the soul, derogatory. It's the opposite of honor, of nobility, and so on. And so if you venture to do a wrongdoing, you seek to, again, just for the sake of examples, being consistent, you call your employer and you say, I'm sick, even though you're not, and you call it a sick leave. Or you lie to your parent, or you lie to your teacher in whatever way, or you cheat on the test. At that moment, your ethics or your gut feeling, if you will, tells you that this is incorrect. And you know that this is incorrect, but yet you put that aside and you proceed. As soon as you proceed with the action and it's done, eventually regret comes in. And that is a sensory system that is entrenched within us that allows us to know that what we've done was actually wrong and not to repeat it again. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed these feelings to be built within us. And they're not only feelings, they're built within our rationale and within our mind. And the Quran awakens in us, in fact, the opposite thing. Awakens within us the issue of honor and nobility, that we should not feel regretful in the sense that we should not be doing wrong. So the Quran tells us on numerous occasions, we've elevated you above most of our creation. فَضَّلْنَاكُمْ عَلَى كَثِيرٍ مِّمَّنْ خَلَقْنَا تَفْضِيلًا. So we've elevated you, made you more noble. And we created you, then molded you. خَلَقْنَاكُمْ ثُمَّ صَوَّرْنَاكُمْ ثُمَّ قُلْنَا لِلْمَلَائِكَةِ اسْجُدُوا لِآدَمَ. And we created you, then molded you, then asked the angels to bow to Adam in a very symbolic way of honor and nobility. In another verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says this, وَلَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي أَحْسَنِ تَقْوِيمٍ. And we created man in the best of forms, in the best of shapes. And so for man to go into a wrong ethical standard and to feel remorse and to feel regret for wrongdoing, although it is part of your checks and balances, the Quran wants to elevate us beyond that and to conform to a correct ethical standard. And so this takes us to another question, which is, if Islam comes, or rather, if our minds come to these conclusions that we can dictate what is right and what is wrong, and that we have this internal system that tells us what is right and what is wrong, and shouldn't we be dictating for ourselves and for our societies what is right and what is wrong? And this is where Islam comes in to define the borders and to define the guidelines. If you go and search on the internet for codes of ethics and conduct, you'll get millions of results. A school, a bank. If you look at TD Canada Trust, for example, code of ethics and conduct. Limitations on how people dress, limitations on their personal finances, limitations on not accepting gifts, limitations and so on. If you go to codes of ethics and conduct, they're usually lengthy, whether they're politicians or their schools or the universities and so on. And people will disagree. Should you wear a hat? Should you not? How long should the skirt be? How long should the pants be? How tight should they be? And so on. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows us best, and He knows what is best for us, and comes to draw within our ethical structure guidelines and borders. And thus, when things boil down to things like drinking, dress code, marriage, adultery, relationships, this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Quran, dictates for us, again, our ethical borders and guidelines. أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, doesn't He know His creation best? Doesn't He know His creation? Islam not only, again, created the system and drew the boundaries for it, but also it took into consideration that gradualism is necessary sometimes when implementing ethical standards. Take the example of drinking, which is a very nice example of how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala slowly adapts a society to a changing ethics. Sahaba were drinking at a time when their aqidah was correct, at a time when they were praying and they were drinking. The forbidding of khamr did not come until much later. And so look at the example of how khamr actually became forbidden in that society of Muslims, in the early society of companions. At the beginning, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed a verse in Mecca, before going to Medina, that says, ومن ثمرات النخيل والأعناب تتخذون منه سكرا ورزقا حسنا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and from the fruits of palm trees and grapes, you take drinks and rizq hasan, and you take good sustenance. Essentially, you eat grapes and dates. And then he distinguished drinking from rizq hasan. And this made the Sahaba actually shy of drinking. And when they heard that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala distinguished between these two categories, that essentially drinking was not rizq hasan, some of the Sahaba felt shy of drinking. From that very first instruction that is nothing to do with forbidding khamr. It's simply a way of adapting to society, or one of the ways of adapting to society, that something else is coming. When they first went to Medina, and there's a time between those two, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals the verse that does essentially a cost-benefit analysis of drinking. And then concludes in that verse, وَإِثْمُهُمَا أَكْبَرُ مِنْ نَفْعِهِمَا, and that their harm is more than their good, without explicitly saying that it is forbidden to drink. And so now the Sahaba are yet at another level of rationalizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who knows best for us, tells us that their ithm or their harm is more than their good. And at that time, some of the well-known Sahaba who were scholars, if you will, felt, just knowing how the revelation was revealed to the Prophet, they felt that the other verse, the next verse is imminent, that it's coming, that forbidding is now on its way. But what happened? Forbidding didn't come yet. It came, another verse yet came and said, وَلَا تَقْرَبُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَأَنْتُمْ سُكَارَى. And yet the third level of gradualism and implementing a change in an ethical standard upon a society. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals that you should not approach prayer when you're drunk. This is at the time of the companions. And by default, that allows the Sahaba to reduce their consumption significantly. And in fact, reduce the marketing value of that commodity as well. Because you're going to pray 5 times a day. If you're going to pray 5 times a day and you're not allowed to approach prayer drunk, then you have to reduce your consumption. And finally, after a period of time, the final verse comes down, revealing that خمر إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب والأزلام ورجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه. In fact, drinking and gambling and so on are filth from Satan, and therefore you should avoid it so that you may be successful. And so that rationale for being successful is also there. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who listen to His words and implement them. Astaghfirullah li wa lakum fastaghfiruhu fa ya fawzal mustaghfirin. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسوله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. And so my dear brothers and sisters, within this topic of ethical standards and an ethical framework that we find, first of all, is nurtured, is within us, is entrenched within us as human beings. And second of all, Islam comes to nurture it. Islam comes to allow this ethical system to evolve. And so if we go back to Surah Al-Shams, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala swears, and finally the answer to the oath was فَأَلْهَمَهَا فُجُورَهَا وَتَقْوَاهَا, and He instilled corruption and good. The following verse to that, فَقَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ دَسَّاهَا. And so Islam encourages and promotes this idea of nurturing the nafs on good ethics and good standards, even though they're pre-established within us. And that's where the Prophet ﷺ comes in with these numerous manners. And as he says in one of the hadiths, إِنَّمَا بُعِثْتُ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمَ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I was only sent to perfect the best of manners. And if He was sent to perfect the best of manners, then that means those manners existed. And He came to perfect them, to nurture them, and to raise our ethical standard at a level beyond what we were at. And that is something we need to be constantly thinking about. And so the numerous ahadith in this, on this topic of ethics come to again nurture the mind. And so when the Prophet ﷺ says, none of you believes until he loves for his brother what he loves for himself, elevates our ethical standard. When the Prophet ﷺ says, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت ومن كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليكرم جاره. وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيُكْرِمْ ضَيْفَهُ. Whoever believes in Allah on the Day of Judgment should say good or remain silent. Ethical standard, avoiding backbiting, avoiding saying things against people. وَمَنْ كَانَ يُؤْمِنُ بِاللَّهِ وَالْيَوْمِ الْآخِرِ فَلْيُكْرِمْ جَارَهُ, being good to your neighbor, and finally being good to your guest. In another hadith Qudsi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَا ابْنَ آدَمْ مَرِضْتُ فَلَمْ تَعِدْنِي. O son of Adam, I was sick and you did not visit me. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talking to a son of Adam on the Day of Judgment, to a human being on the Day of Judgment. O son of Adam, I was sick and you didn't visit me. And so the son of Adam says, Oh Allah, how can I visit you when you're the Lord and the Most Supreme? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, أَمَا عَلِمْتَ أَنَّ عَبْدِي فُلَانًا قَدْ مَرِضْ فَلَمْ تَعُدْ. Didn't you know that my servant such and such was sick and you did not visit him? And the hadith continues, وَلَعُدْتَهُ لَوَجَدْتَنِي عِنْدَهُ. And if you had visited him, you would have found me near him, near this sick person. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, وَيَقُولُ يَا ابْنَ آدَمْ أَسْتَطْعَمْتُكَ فَلَمْ تُطْعِمْنِي. I seeked food from you and you did not feed me. And then the son of Adam says, Oh Allah, how can I feed you in the Most Supreme? And he says, such and such person was hungry and he sought food from you and you did not give him. And you can imagine the number of beggars that we see on our streets and how many we're able to pass by every day. And this is again a generic hadith that is very general in terms of its creation, all of God's creation. And then the hadith continues, أَمَا عَلِمْتَ يَا ابْنَ آدَمْ اسْتَسْقَيْتُكَ فَلَمْ تُسْقِنِي. I was thirsty and you did not quench my thirst. And again, the same scenario is repeated. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, if you had quenched his thirst, you would have found me near him. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through the Quran and through the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, wants to nurture and elevate our ethical standard. And again, draw guidelines through the norms that were established in the Quran, through clothing, for example, whether it be for brothers or for sisters and so on, and the limitations of those. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam says, مَا أَكْرَمَ شَابٌ شَيْخًا لِسِنِّهِ إِلَّا قَيَّضَ اللَّهُ لَهُ مَنْ يُكْرِمُهُ عِنْدَ سِنَّهِ. If you are good to an old person, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bestow upon you a young man who will help you when you're older. And so this idea of tying ethical standards to faith is fundamental for us, but it should not be the only justification for our goodness, because that is something. And so when we engage in discussions, and for example, I see my wife being asked the question of, aren't you feeling hot, the hijab, and the answer is, aren't you feeling hot too? And no matter how much clothes you take off, it's not going to resolve the issue, because the weather is just that. And so your belief in the deen is one reason for adhering to that, but it should also be ingrained within you that it is because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows the boundaries of my ethical guidelines which are already within me. This is how I adhere to them. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us of those who listen to these words and apply as much as they can from them. اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل سيدنا محمد كما صليت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على سيدنا محمد كما باركت على سيدنا إبراهيم وعلى آل سيدنا إبراهيم في العالمين إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وبارك لنا اللهم فيما أعطيت وقنا واصرف عنا برحمتك شر ما قضيت. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الشرك والمشركين وانصر عبادك في كل مكان يا رب العالمين. سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين وأقم الصلاة.